Hi, I'm Davey. I'm a sailor and a sewing machine engineer. And this video is dedicated to Samuel Sima Cabo from the Hope Academy in Sierra Leone. In the hope that this can help him to keep his sewing machines going, to teach the people of the Hope Academy. So let's see how we can get on. So this is a Singer 15. This is quite an old Singer 15. It's quite an early one. But it's the type that were copied by many other companies, including a lot of the Japanese after the war. And also now a lot of these are available actually new. I think probably from China, possibly from India as well. So this model is basically still in production today. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk through some of the model and some of the features of this model in the hope that that can help Samuel and anybody else who has one of these machines to keep them running, because they are great machines and there's not very much that will stop them. Okay, we'll start by taking off the end plate and having a look inside. We can see on the end plate here we've got the take-up arm, we've got the tensioner here, presser foot lift and a little thread guide. To take it off, all we need to do is loosen that screw and then it will lift and then just slip off. And that's it. So you can see this one is a little bit fluffy. There's a little bit of debris inside there. So all that really needs is a bit of a clean out. Often I'll just use a bit of a paintbrush and just clean all of the dust out of it. If it is very thick or there's a lot of old oil and grease in there, then some white spirits or mineral spirits, or another very useful tool is some kind of penetrating oil, and just give it a bit of a squirt in there and again give it a bit of a clean. And you can see now that is cleaned up very nicely. So once you've got the main thick of it out of there, you can just operate the different levers just to make sure everything is nice and working. Presser foot tension can be moved up and down. There you go. And so if we just spin it over, we can see how the needle bar moves up and down. Very, very simple mechanism. So there's the end of the main shaft. It rotates with this boss here, which has got a bushing clamped around it, and that pulls the needle bar up, pushes the needle bar down. It's as simple as that. The take-up arm has a little boss on the side of the take-up arm that fits into a slot in the side of the end of this shaft, and that's what makes that move up and down. So that is it. Very, very simple. If you need to move the needle bar for any reason, the needle bar clamp is this here. The screw for it is accessed from the back. I don't know if you can see. Yes, you can. So there's a hole here. So this hole here, what you need to do is bring it all the way to the bottom, so it's there, and then you access it from the other side. You can put a screw through that hole, and then you can undo the screw for the needle clamp. So then if you need to move the needle bar up or down for any reason, then that can be done. The presser foot clamp, bar clamp is this one here, so this screw here. And what we want is, when the foot is on the bottom, we want a little bit of play on the lever. And when the foot is up, we want the needle to be able to go all the way to the bottom without the needle clamp fouling on the foot. So they are the two limits that we want to try to achieve. So a little bit of play when it's at the bottom, and not catching the needle bar when it's at the top. They are our two limitations. For oiling, if you are oiling this machine, you can put a little bit of oil in the top here, little bit of oil in the top here, a little bit of oil on the top of there, a little bit on the thread, and then just a little drop of oil onto all of the different parts that are going to move. And that's pretty much it for that. So what else have we got? So at the back, so if we take off the back panel, you can see we've got some moving parts in there. Now, if nothing is broken in there, then there's no real need to alter or touch anything. Again, a useful thing if it's a bit dirty like that, give it a good spray with a little bit of penetrating oil or some white spirits, and then just work it around, let that work in, and that will clean out the old oil and the old grease and any debris that's got into the bushing and bearing surfaces. And you'll actually feel it coming loose. And then once it's going, so we want to bring this one right up to the very, very top, and then once it's at the top, we can put a drop of oil in the top of there, and that will go onto that one, drop of oil into there, drop of oil into the middle one, and then there's also an oil filler there, one there, and one there, and a one there. So we drop a little bit of oil into each of those, and then another one here. And some of them have an oil filler in the hand wheel. This one doesn't. And then on the inside, if you've got the back cover off, you can just pop a little bit of oil onto anywhere where you can see metal surfaces moving against each other. And normally that's pretty much all you need for that. That is now moving nicely. Bobbin winder, nice and simple. Push it in and it runs up against the wheel, and it's adjustable. There's a little screw here. If we put a screwdriver into there, we can loosen it and we can change the angle so we get it a little bit closer to the wheel if it's not touching. When the bobbin fills, it lifts this and then that pops it back up. So push it down to fill the bobbin, and then that will automatically lift up when the bobbin is full. And there is a little oil point there, so we can put a drop of oil in there. That's all it needs, just a drop. And give it a little bit of a spin just to get the oil through it. Stitch length is controlled here, and again a little bit of penetrating oil just sprayed into there, and just give it a little move up and down just to make sure it's nice and free, and then the oil from the top will run down into there and will make it nice and clean and lubricate it. The underside of this machine is a very lovely and very simple design. There's no rotating shafts, everything just slips from side to side, it's oscillating. So this shaft moves up and down, and that's what controls the movement of the hook over here. And here it controls the movement of the feed dogs here, going up and down. And then this one, as this one turns, this one will move up and down, and that will control, there you go, that controls the feed dogs over here moving forwards and backwards. So that's the drive, and this is the drive, and these are the three movements that are happening here. Feed dog up and down, the semi-rotation or oscillation of the hook, and the feed dog forward and backward movement. For oil, little drop of oil on all of these surfaces where we have, it's a little taper, it's a tapered pin, comes to a point and it fits into a hole, and it just needs just a single drop of oil on each one every so often. There's a little hole there, we put a few drops of oil into there and that will soak through, and there's another oil hole there, a little bit on there, and then there's another oil hole here. And that is all that is needed for oiling. No, it's not. There's another one there as well. So that's all that's needed for oiling. So if you have any problem with the height of your feed dogs, then this screw here is the adjustment. So if the feed dogs are not going high enough, you can loosen that screw, push them up a little bit, tighten that up again, and then see if that's as far as you need to go. And that is pretty much it for adjustment down here. So looking at the hook, this is the back of the hook and what's called the hook race, this assembly here. And on this model, there's this big screw here. Now, you shouldn't need to take that big screw off to get the hook take the hook out, but sometimes the whole thing gets stuck, and you need to loosen that, take it out, and then the whole thing falls apart as you take it apart. But you shouldn't need to take that out, ideally. Okay, so this is the hook assembly here, and we're going to have a look at that. So we've still got the bobbin case in, so we'll remove the bobbin case. And inside, so this is the hook race, and this is the hook itself. And there will be some movement. The hook can move. It doesn't need to move a lot, but there is movement in there, and there needs to be. So we're going to put the needle right at the top, and we're going to loosen these two screws and take them out. Okay, now if it's an old machine, if it hasn't been taken apart for a long time, this could be pretty tight, but it should just be able to wiggle around, and then it should come loose. Now if we look at the back of this piece, so we can see these raised pieces here, they fit into these grooves. So when we put it back together, we need to make sure that it's properly in the grooves before we put the screws in and tighten it up. And we can see we've got some little bits of debris in here, then that would all really need to be cleaned out. Okay, so here's the hook in the hook race. So if we're going to take that out, we need to loosen this big screw on the back. Get a better size screwdriver for it. So that comes off, and then this next piece comes off, and it's located with these two holes, and those two holes fit over these two pins, and we need to make sure we get it on the right way around so that these curves are facing that way, away from us. We don't want to try to put it on that way around. It needs to go on that way. So when you take this apart, put it down in the right order so you can put it back together again. And then here, we just lift this out, and then that is the hook. So the hook is the important part. What do we need to know about it? It has an actual point. So this is the point of the hook that we can see here. The point of the hook must be sharp. If it's not sharp, it won't pick up the thread. There's a groove here that the needle goes into. Now if there's any problem with your needle positioning, or if you've been using too thin a needle and too thick fabric, you might find that there are some impact marks on either side of here where the needle has hit the hook instead of going into this gap. If you do have that, then you need to get some emery cloth or some other fine abrasive and polish it out till it's nice and smooth. And then basically we just want to have a look at these edges and make sure that these edges are nice and clean, relatively sharp, no rust, no dirt, no debris stuck to that, because these are the bearing faces that rub against the other piece of metal when it is working. So that is the hook. Now this is the hook race, and this is where the hook fits, and we can see in here we've got little bits of debris. So it's not a good idea to use metal to clean it out. So what we want to try to do, if we can, is use something soft. We don't want to damage that metal in there, otherwise we are going to prematurely age the machine. So a bit of a wipe down with a brush, spray a little bit of penetrating oil or white spirits or kerosene, and then we can give that a clean up. And there you go, that's now nice and clean and ready to take the hook back. Before we put it in, put a couple of drops of oil in there. And now we can put the hook back in. Make sure we get it the right way, that bit facing out. So that's where it sits in there. And you can just run it around just to feel if there's any places where it's catching, or any places where it's if it's very loose, it's going to be a problem. If it's a little bit loose, it won't be too bad. So we can kind of get an idea by just spinning it around in there by hand of what condition it's in. Does it fit? If it's really, really loose, then take it out, buy a new hook. There will be some wear in the hook race as well, but if you get a new hook, at least you're removing some of that wear. So this needs to be checked to make sure this is clean, there's no debris on that. Then that sits back on those two pins. And then again, just check that the other part's clean. That sits on there, and it sits just inside the two pins. And then the big screw goes in the bottom. And we're going to make it tight, but we're not going to tighten it so much that we can't move it again. And then just a quick check to make sure that the hook still turns and we haven't jammed anything. And then that is ready to fit back into the machine. So fitting it into the machine, we need to make sure that the needle is up and out of the way, and you can see the needle there. Now I could have taken the needle out altogether, and that would have also helped. But knowing where the needle is quite useful. Now there's this carrier, and this carrier has got these little springs on the end. We need to make sure that there's no debris in the ends of those springs. So we can just give them a little bit of a clean out again. Give the whole thing a bit of a clean with some white spirits or some penetrating oil. I've got some oil on the end of this paintbrush, and that will just clean that debris away. So we'll set the hook up there so we can slip it back into position, and it's going to just sit on top of that frame, and then we want to rotate and wiggle it about until we get those two grooves to sit into the grooves in the casing, and then pop one of the screws in, see if we can find the hole. That's it located. Now just before we tighten it up, we want to make sure that it turns and nothing is jammed. So it's turning okay. So now we can just tighten up the screws a little bit, just enough just to nip them up. They don't need to be over tightened. And we make sure that it still turns. And that is pretty much a service for this machine. There's not very much else on it. So if your machine is not working, we want to try and find out why. We need to turn the hand wheel and make sure that the needle is going up and down and the hook is turning. So that's what we need to know. They are both turning, that means none of the linkages have been broken. And we also need to make sure that the take-up arm is going up and down. Okay, once we've established that, we need to get into there and we need to have a look and see what's going on. So we're going to need the foot off. We're going to need the needle on, but we'll need the needle plate out of the way. So that's the needle plate out of the way. And if you can, if these two screws here, we'll take the feed dog off and that will give us a little bit more visibility, which may be useful. So now we can see down inside the hook assembly to where the hook is. So if I just turn the hand wheel, we can see the needle coming up and we can see the hook moving. And as you see, it's an oscillating hook, it just moves halfway. So what we're looking for, here's the needle coming down, and there is the point of the hook. You see it just go there? So it's just coming past the needle. As the needle is still going down, the hook goes to the end of its travel, which is there, and then as I continue to turn the hand wheel, the needle starts to come up, and there is when the hook point passes the back of the needle at the scarf, and that's where it picks up the thread. So if the hook is not passing close to the needle at that point, it won't pick up the thread. So that is what we need to see. And I'll just run that a couple of times. There's the hook going back, there it is, pick up. Needle comes down, hook comes back, and there's the pickup. So that's what we need to see as we turn the machine and we look to see what the hook's doing. So if your hook is blunt, it might not pick up. If your hook is too far away from the needle, if it's too loose, it might not pick up. If your needle is bent, it might not pick up. If your needle is in the wrong way around, it won't pick up. So these are all things that could cause it not to pick up the thread. So that's what you want to check when you are trying to diagnose a problem with a 15 class hook assembly. I've fitted some thread, so we can now see if we can watch how the pickup happens. So there's the needle down, there's the pickup. The hook has now picked up the thread. It's now going to wrap it halfway around the bobbin, and then it's going to let it go. And the take-up arm is going to pull it back up. And there you go, and that has created our stitch. So that's the first stitch. So as the needle goes down, there's the hook coming past the needle. It's now going to go back the other way. Now the thread has gone slack, so it's created the loop. The hook has now picked up the thread and it's going to carry it around the bobbin. We can now see it going over the bobbin case. It gets to the end and then the hook will drop it. There you go. And now the take-up arm pulls it back up. So that is how our stitch is being made. So if your machine is not doing that, then there's something wrong. And that's what you need to try and find out. So just watch a little bit as we make some stitches. And see how the thread is wrapped around the bobbin and then pulled back up by the take-up arm. So that's how we are making stitches in a 15 class machine. If your hook is very loose in the hook race, then it might work if you take some grease and wipe some grease in the inside before you put the hook back in. That will help to stop the hook rattling around, and the grease will fill some of the space. So that might be a way to get a machine working that isn't picking up. And it will also quieten down a very noisy machine if it has a very noisy hook. But the best thing to do is to buy a new hook. So that's the bones of your Singer 15. Or a 15 copy. They are all pretty much the same with a few different modifications here and there. It's an incredibly reliable machine. It's a very simple and robust design and mechanism. There's not very much that can go wrong. Sometimes things break, but other than that, there's not very much that can go wrong. And the most important thing in any sewing machine is the needle. So make sure you have a good needle. Change your needle regularly. After every 8 to 10 hours of sewing, put a new needle in. They are only pennies, and they make all the difference between good sewing and bad sewing. I hope that video is useful for you all and helps you keep some of your machines going. Good luck, Samuel.